Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tiernan Sittenfeld, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at the League of Conservation Voters. Today, we're releasing LCV's 2023 National Environmental Scorecard with our state LCV partners and two incredible congressional champions who both scored a perfect 100%. First, we'll hear from Senate Environment and Public Works Committee Chair Tom Carper from Delaware, who has been a tireless leader for climate action, clean air and water, and so much more. We're especially grateful to him for the vital role he played in ensuring that the biggest thing we've ever done on climate, clean energy, and environmental justice, the Inflation Reduction Act, was enacted into law. We'll also hear from Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who was featured in the scorecard for the first time in 2023 after a stellar first year in Congress. She's already become an indispensable leader, pushing for the LNG pause, fighting for environmental justice, and so much more. And then we'll hear from our Vice President for Federal Policy, Matthew Davis, who will share some additional scorecard highlights. We'd also be happy to take your questions after that. Thank you all, and Senator Carper, over to you.
Tiernan, thank you so much. My congratulations to our colleague from Virginia, from Richmond, I believe. And I grew up in Danville, Virginia, and I remember going to Richmond when I was in the 7th grade with all my class and we met the governor of Virginia just by luck. And he asked me, out of all the classes, he said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I would like to be governor of Virginia." And he said, "Well, I'm governor of Virginia. You'll have to move to another state." And I did, and I moved to Delaware and became governor of Delaware. So I grew up. My sister, I grew up in Virginia, so I have great affection for that state, your state now. But I just want to say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you to folks in the League of Conservation Voters for inviting us to join today's press conference. And with our colleague from the House, and thank you for the 100% on my scorecard. When I was growing up in Virginia, I don't know if they got a lot of A pluses. I did okay. Won a Navy ROTC scholarship and became a naval flight officer in the Vietnam War, so I did all right, but didn't get too many A pluses. But I'm delighted to share the honor with my staff here in DC and in Delaware. We're only as good as the people around us. I am blessed with just wonderful men and women. The fight to protect our one and only planet has never mattered more. We're here today to discuss the indispensable role that the League of Conservation Voters has played in helping us to make the largest investments in climate in the history of our country. And since 1970, the League of Conservation Voters National Environmental Scorecard has been highlighting the action that members of Congress take on some of the most consequential issues that we face as a nation and as a planet. The votes that we take in Congress affect the future course of climate change and its impacts on public health and safety in our communities. These issues matter deeply to Americans across the country, Virginia and Delaware, all the way to California and Alaska and back. We know the majority of Americans are worried about global warming, concerned about it. And so we believe that the Congress and the President, both of us, all of us, need to continue to act in concert. The LCV scorecard measures Congress's responsiveness to the widespread public support for environmental action. And we have no time to lose because there is, as President Macron of France reminds us all the time, there is no planet B. This is the only one we're going to have. The international scientific consensus is clear. The scale and the scope of the environmental challenges that we face are, I think, without precedent. And as chairman of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, I have worked tirelessly with our colleagues, Democrat and Republican, on and off the committee to craft bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The historic investments that we've made through these laws are helping us to fight the climate change and build the infrastructure that we need to meet our climate goals. And we are already witnessing the impact of these laws in facilitating job growth and bringing new opportunities for success, for safety, for health to communities across this country. And for example, in my own home state of Delaware, the first state, we are excited to see a new offshore wind power industry taking shape, supported by worker training programs that we help to create. But there's no question that we have more work to do. There's a lot more work to do in implementing this historic legislation. It's up to all of us. It's up to the public, our business leaders, and yes, even to politicians to work together to do even more. We got to light a fire under elected officials at every level of government to get them to take our environmental challenges seriously and to see that the solutions are within our reach. And that is a shared responsibility. For my part, I am deeply committed to continuing our work to clean up our air, clean up our water, protect our communities from harmful chemicals, and make sure that our country is leading the fight against climate change and setting an example for the rest of the world to follow. Leadership by example. And I'm delighted to know that LCV is here to help us lead the way and to hold all of us accountable. And when we do a good job, to let the world know about it. And also pleased to see new members of Congress, including our Congresswoman from Richmond, Virginia, joining the push for more clean jobs and healthier communities from sea to shining sea. With that, let me turn the program back to Tiernan. Tiernan, it is all yours, and a big thank and a shout out to the wonderful men and women who serve with me on the Environmental Public Works Committee, and especially by our staff. They're worth their weight in gold. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman Carper, to you and to your wonderful staff for your tireless leadership. And we are so glad that we get to continue our work together throughout 2024. And of course, we also appreciate your kind words about LCV and the scorecard, which has been the primary yardstick for evaluating the environmental records of members of Congress since 1970 and is available for download in English and in Spanish at scorecard.lcv.org. We're also happy to provide people with hard copies of them. But I will say that on the heels of the 117th Congress, which was one of the most productive in history, the first session of the 118th Congress was one of the least productive and most dysfunctional ever. The year began in chaos as House Republicans fought with each other. And unfortunately, it didn't get any better as first Speaker McCarthy and then Speaker Johnson catered to their fossil fuel allies and their most extreme MAGA Republican colleagues, including with an astounding 31 recorded attempts to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. They continued these unsuccessful attempts over and over as the communities across the country and the world suffered through the deadly and devastating climate impacts of the hottest year on record. And they continue these unsuccessful attempts, even though this new law has already created nearly 250,000 new jobs. In stark contrast, the Democratic-led Senate and the Biden-Harris administration stood strong against these attacks and continued to make progress. Most notably, in 2023, the Senate confirmed many distinguished, diverse judicial nominees with experience working for the public interest, while the Biden-Harris administration made significant progress through executive action, including new national monuments, new standards for methane. Thank you for your leadership on that, in particular, Senator Carper, as well. So many more draft standards that are still to be finalized in the coming weeks and months. The 2023 scorecard includes 16 votes in the Senate and a nearly record-breaking 36 votes in the House. The sheer volume of House votes speaks once again to the House Republican leadership's dreadful combination of dysfunction and desire to act at the behest of their polluter allies and their most extreme MAGA colleagues. We're seeing that play out even as we speak, as House Republicans have once again brought us to the brink of a government shutdown. Across both chambers, Democrats scored an average of 97%, and Republicans scored an average of 4% on the 2023 scorecard. By comparison, across both chambers, Democrats scored an average of 96%, and Republicans scored an average of 6% on the 2022 scorecard. For the second time, the 2023 scorecard includes a section highlighting the leadership and high scores of members of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And now I'm delighted to turn it to Congresswoman McClellan.
Well, thank you, Tiernan, for those that kind introduction, and thank you, Senator Carper, for your leadership on climate action and environmental justice and environmental protection. I am excited to be here today for the release of LCV's 2023 National Environmental Scorecard, and I am honored to receive a perfect 100 score for my first year in Congress. I was sworn into Congress a year ago next week after a special election, but my climate and environmental justice advocacy began long before that. I served nearly 2 decades in the Virginia General Assembly, and during that time, I championed the passage of major pieces of environmental legislation and climate action legislation like the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which made Virginia the first Southern state with 100% clean energy standard. When I came to Congress, succeeding A. Donald McCeachin, who was also a champion on these issues, I was determined to hit the ground running and continue both my leadership and build on his legacy on climate action and environmental justice. As the first Black Congresswoman to represent Virginia, I feel a deep responsibility to address climate change and the longstanding environmental injustices that plague vulnerable communities across the nation. Far too often, it is low-income communities and communities of color, tribal and indigenous communities who are disproportionately impacted by climate degradation and environmental injustice. As lawmakers, it is incumbent upon us to be their voice, to uplift their perspectives, and address the inequities they face. And again, I want to build off of the legacy of my friend and predecessor, the late A. Donald McCeachin, who was a true environmental justice champion. I knew there would be challenges in the minority, but I was encouraged by the incredible accomplishments made in the 117th Congress. However, nothing could have prepared me for the level of dysfunction and chaos that has defined the House Republican Conference this year. They have proven time and again that they cannot govern and will do anything in their power to undermine the progress that Democrats and the Biden-Harris administration have made. The contrast is startling. Last Congress, Democrats passed once-in-a-generation legislation to invest in clean energy solutions and climate change mitigation efforts, bills that are already delivering positive results in my district, Virginia's 4th, and communities across the country. Under extreme House Republicans, we've seen nothing more than abhorrent attempts to strip these resources away from vulnerable communities and unserious messaging bills that ignore the urgency of this moment. For the third time this Congress, we are barreling towards another potential government shutdown because an extreme contingent of the House Republicans want to hijack our appropriations process, drastically cut funding for key federal agencies like the Department of Energy and the EPA, and load down these must-pass pieces of legislation with harmful policy riders that prioritize polluters over people. Despite their anti-science, anti-climate agenda, I am proud of the work that we've done to fight back against their efforts and to protect our historic progress while advancing new protections in collaboration with the Biden-Harris administration. This year on the House floor, I fought back against Republicans' harmful bills that sought to increase our reliance on fossil fuels for decades to come, that attempted to roll back our growing clean energy economy and undermine critical public health protections. I was proud to help lead congressional calls to the Department of Energy and the EPA to address PFAS contamination, finalize a strong mercury and air toxic standards rule, protect communities from harmful soot pollution, and revisit pending liquid natural gas export approvals to include consideration of their climate, environmental, and public health impacts. And I was proud to partner with LCV every step of the way. As we look ahead to 2024, I will continue to be a strong climate and environmental justice champion and fight for vulnerable communities across the nation. And I look forward to continuing this partnership with LCV. But first, thank you to LCV for your leadership and the release of this important scorecard. Again, I look forward to our continued collaboration, and I'm confident that together we will take the necessary steps to ensure a healthier, more sustainable future for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman McClellan. Very much appreciate your being here today and all of your great leadership here in Congress and in your first year in Congress and across this year as well. You've really done so much for our communities, for our democracy, and for our planet. And we very much look forward to continuing to work with you. My name is Matthew Davis, and I'm the Vice President of Federal Policy here at the League of Conservation Voters. Let me also extend a thank you to Chairman Carper for his decades of service and leadership and for joining today's 2023 scorecard launch. As Tiernan mentioned, for 2023, we scored a near record 36 votes in the House and 16 votes in the Senate. A few notable statistics: 129 House Republicans earned zeros, and 140 House Democrats earned 100s. 11 Senate Republicans scored zeros, and only 5 had scores in the double digits, while 26 Senate Democrats scored 100s, and 5 Democrats and independents caucusing with the Democrats scored under 88%. As others have said, the Congresswoman, having lived much of this, 2023 was a real stark contrast from climate progress in 2022, as extreme Republicans plunged the House into chaos and manufactured crises, resulting in one of the least productive legislative years ever. And as others have also referenced, the votes of 2023 are still quite relevant to our current political situation and the news of the day. 15 of the near record 36 votes we scored in the House were on extreme amendments and government funding bills that are still the front page topic. As extreme MAGA Republicans, again, are pushing our country to the brink of a government shutdown over unreasonable, unpopular, poison pill policy riders that on government funding for the rest of the fiscal year 2024. There were many more attacks than we have included in the scorecard, both in terms of voice votes, and recorded votes. And our panel of experts had quite a challenging task to select those that were either the most egregious or the most representative of the type or subject of the attack. All but one of the House votes included here were attacks on key environmental, democracy, and equity issues, meaning that they got recommendations from us or other environmental groups for members to vote no. And it reads like an oil and gas executive's wish list. House Republicans reserved their signature bill, H.R. 1, dubbed the People Over Polluters Act, the Polluters Over People Act, for a sweeping package of bills and amendments that contained huge giveaways to polluters and would lock the U.S. into dirty, new fossil fuel production and infrastructure for decades and block common sense reforms. They also passed H.R. 21, which would require more oil and gas drilling on public lands for any releases from the National Petroleum Reserve, which is set up to protect consumers from high gas prices. The House voted on 5 Congressional Review Act, or CRA, resolutions to attempt to block administrative action on protecting retirement savings, safeguarding clean water, reducing air pollution from trucks, and saving endangered species. Transitioning to the Senate, they voted on that same group of CRA resolutions plus 2 additional, one on critical habitat for endangered species and one on the tailored Buy America waiver for electric vehicle chargers. So then that makes up 7 of the 16 scored Senate votes. CRA resolutions have a special status in the procedures of the Senate, and therefore the minority party could force votes on them, which is why those votes were taken in 2023. In contrast to the House, the Senate remained in Democratic control and saw no leadership drama, keeping a brisk pace of confirming 69 lifetime federal judge nominations and adding to the federal bench a group of qualified, historic people, diverse in both their personal and professional backgrounds and experiences. In particular, I'd like to highlight the confirmation of Rachel Bloom-Katz to the 6th Circuit. She has a distinguished record as a public interest litigator across numerous worthy areas of law, including First Amendment, administrative, voting rights, immigration, criminal, and environmental. I will stop there to keep my remarks brief. And if you have any questions for me or our other panelists, please enter it into the Q&A function, and we will call on you to ask your question.
Mika, I believe there's a couple questions from Tim. Tim, did you want to come off mute and ask your questions, or do you want me to share them?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. First of all, could you speak a little bit about the records of McConnell's likely successors, Cornyn, Thune, and Barrasso? And then the second question, Matt had all those figures leading off, and could he compare those to the last scorecard?
Sure. Why don't I tackle the first question and Matthew can tackle the second. We anticipated that the first one might come up when we saw the news earlier, a little bit ago. So as people may have seen, Senator McConnell got a 6% for 2023, as did Senator Cornyn and Senator Thune, and Senator Barrasso got a 0%. But I think what is also telling is their lifetime score, since they've all been around for quite a long time. Senator McConnell has a 9%, Senator Cornyn and Barrasso both have 7% lifetime scores, and Senator Thune has an 11%. But I would say those scores are all appalling. There's no material difference between any of them. And while I think in some ways, Senate Republican leadership may compare favorably to the House Republican leadership in this moment, when it comes to protecting the air we breathe, the water we drink, the lands that we cherish, we are concerned about that sort of whomever succeeds him would continue in the same direction. Does that answer that question, Tim?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, great. Matthew, do you want to shed any light on
Sure.
it?
Yes, I'm happy to. Tim, on your stats, I know that between last year and this year, there were a lot more Republicans, I think over 30 Republicans who got zeros in the House. And between, compared to last year, 30 more. And sort of flip side, for House Democrats, approximately 40 more got hundreds this year than last year. For when it comes to the Senate, there were many more Senate Democrats who got 100%. I believe last year it was 9, and this year it was 26. And I need to double check the number of zeros last year on the Republican side. I think it was 5, and this year it was 11, but I need to double check the 5 number.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. I'm not sure if there are other questions. I think the scores do largely speak for themselves, but Mika, is there a final question before we need to wrap?
There is not, but if you do have a question, please write it in the Q&A now.
Great. And if people are thinking about it later and have questions, we're always happy to do a follow-up, but we appreciate you joining us today. All of the entire scorecard is now online, and hope everyone has a good afternoon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.